Hello gorgeous peeps, I'm Chris from TechSpert, and this right here is the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra, ZTE's super Billy Big Bollocks premium flagship smartphone for 2021. Now the ZTE Axon 20 from last year was a bit of a mixed bag to say the least. That under-display selfie camera was certainly unique and innovative, but it didn't exactly work particularly well. The ZTE has wisely scrapped all of that, no gimmicks, just back to beefy devices with some proper full-on serious camera tech. So let's whip the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra out of that box, test the camera tech, test out the performance with a good bit of Genshin Impact, and cover everything you need to know about the hardware and the software. And for more on the latest greatest tech, please do plug, subscribe, and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Alright, so what do you get in this rather serious big black box? Well, you get one smartphone, obvs, one Pokepin device, one proper huge PSU. It's got a good bit of heft to it as well. You could knock out a rhino with this thing. One Type-C to Type-C USB cable, one pair of headphones. They are the in-ear scrapey efforts, which is sort of alright as a backup pair to chuck in your bag just in case. Oh, and don't get too excited by the fact that they're 3.5mm headphones, because bundled in the box you also get a 3.5mm to Type-C dongle. So yeah, bugger all headphone jack on the Axon 30 Ultra. And last but not least, you do get a protective cover bundled in there as well, but it's not your typical rubber Johnny effort because it is a stiff, fnar, bit of plastic with the biggest cutout in the world for that enormous camera chassis. Alright, so that is box done. Now I've got to say, first impressions of the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra, I definitely quite like some of the design aspects of it, including the fact that it's all sharp edges and contours. It's definitely quite angular in design, which helps to stand it out from the rest of the smartphone crowd. Thankfully, despite the fact that those edges are rather sharp, the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra doesn't feel uncomfortable to clutch, although one-handed use is going to be a bit of a bugger. So this is near enough a 6.7-inch smartphone, pretty standard size in 2021 for an Android handset, but you're going to be wanting using two mitts when you're using it. And also, rather comedically, ZTE bills the Axon 30 Ultra as a super skinny smartphone, which is definitely overselling it. It's not like massively chunky, but you do have that jutting camera chassis which adds a fair bit of girth to this beast, no doubt. Thankfully though, at 188 grams, it's certainly not cumbersome to wield, certainly not compared with some flagship smartphones like the Galaxy S21 Ultra and the Mi 11 Ultra. Around back you've got some anti-glare glass to avoid any greasy smears and other yum-tastic stuff like that. It seems to do the job quite nicely. I actually quite like the aesthetics, I've got to say, despite the fact that camera chassis is absolutely hilariously huge. Apparently that surface texture is created by an elaborate 15-stage etching process to, and I quote, pursue a touch feeling close to real silk. Does it actually feel like silk? Not really, it feels like your typical smooth glass smartphone arse. And here in the UK you have but one colour choice, which is black. A little bit boring there, but never mind. As for durability, well, it's Gorilla Glass 5 plate in front and back as well, so that should hopefully prove nice and durable. A nice bit of scratch resistant action there. Shouldn't miss up the latest Gorilla Glass 6 or even Gorilla Glass Victus for that display to add a bit of drop resistance in there as well, but touch wood, the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra should prove nice and hardy. Although that said, there's no mention of IP ratings for water and dust resistance, so I wouldn't go taking it in a bubbly bath with you. And before we go about setting up the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra, let's just check out that SIM tray, if I can actually get the pin in there. And it's pretty standard stuff. As you can see, there's support for 2 SIMs at once, but no support unfortunately for micro SD memory cards. Alright, we have one ZTE Axon 30 Ultra all set up and ready for action. What you got here is the latest, freshest Android 11, as you'd expect, of course, on a 2021 handset. But you do have ZTE's own MyOS 11 slathered on top of that. So you will see some aesthetical changes in the likes of the status bar when you drag that down, all the little toggles that you got to play around with there. And although you've only got a small number on there to start with, you can of course fully customize that to add in a whole ton of others. And MyOS 11 kind of reminds me of Asus's Zen UI as well, in that it's a mostly stock version of Android. So as you've got the usual Google Discover feed, for instance. You can drag down that notifications bar from anywhere on screen. You do of course get an apps tray, thank Christ. And beyond some aesthetical changes, the settings menu hasn't really changed up too much at all either. A few extra bits chucked in there. So for instance, if you go to Sync Mind, this is where you'll find the likes of the AI System Engine tool, which basically just helps to keep your smartphone ticking over nicely, make sure you've got plenty of memory and other resources to do everything you need to do. You jump on into features, you've got a few extra bits in here. You got the likes of the Z Pop, which is quite common on a lot of Chinese smartphones. There's basically just a whole bunch of customizable shortcuts. So for instance, you can quickly bring up the menu options platforms. You've got the usual screen recording tools. You've also got screen edge mistouch prevention, which is always handy when you've got a screen that actually curves around the edges of the phone. Although touch wood, I haven't had that problem so far with the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra, and I've been using it for about 24 hours. But if you do find that your palm fat is intruding on that screen and accidentally mashing buttons for you, then you can up the ante on that one. I was also psyched to see as well in the gesture and motion section, you do have the option to shake the phone to turn on the flashlights. So similar to the karate chop that you get on Motorola phones. Alright, let's give this a go. Shake, 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 shake. Seems to be shaking it so effectively that I'm turning it on and turning it off at the same time. There you go. So you've got to give it just a quick one like that. There you go. Lots of other features on here as well, including an always on display, which you can schedule as well, so it only turns on during the day. And lots of styles to choose between, including the usual analog efforts, digital, and some more trippy stuff, including neon owls and the usual inevitable hippie slogans, which are designed to inspire and motivate, but just make me want to puke in my mouth a bit. Thankfully, you can completely customize these, so that one's a bit more realistic. As for storage, well, you got a choice of 128 or 256 gigs of space here on the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra, depending on how much dodgy stuff you are going to be downloading. And it is UFS 3.1 like most premium smartphones these days, so nice and nippy. As for your security shenanigans here on the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra, well, it's an in-display fingerprint sensor housed quite high up the screen, and so far, touch wood, seems absolutely fine, nice and responsive, not the nippiest round for sure, but doesn't seem to require a couple of taps in order to actually go through. And you've got the usual face unlock support as well, with a bit of raise to wake action too, and this seems really, really nippy indeed. Certainly no worries on that front. So the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra rocks a 6.67 inch AMOLED screen, pretty standard size and technology for a fairly premium smartphone in 2021. It's Full HD Plus resolution, 2400 by 1080, reasonably sharp despite the spacious panel. As you get some high def content on there, suddenly everything looks nice and lush. You've got HDR support as well, full 10-bit color action. Unfortunately, at the time I shot this video, there was no support for Netflix or Disney Plus, but hopefully that will be coming once the phone is generally released. The colors are quite poppy on the default settings, but if you want to, you can go into the display settings and change up the options in there, so you can have them from standard to colorful, so basically just gives it a little bit more vibrancy to it all. You can actually change up the color temperature as well, cool it down a bit, warm it up. And ZTE has packed this thing with some impressive refresh rate action as well. It's set to auto by default, so it can scale up and down depending on what app you're actually using. You can boost it all the way up to 144 Hz, which is great news for any compatible games that you might want to play. And certainly just whizzing about through your desktops, the menus and all that is a super smooth experience, absolutely loving it. And like with your Samsung smartphone, ZTE has crammed a teeny little selfie cam orifice right there in the middle of the display up at the very top end, so clearly they decided against another under-display selfie cam for the 30 Ultra, probably a good idea. And like many smartphones around this sort of mid-range price point, you do have a stereo speaker setup here on the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra, so let's just bump up the volume and see how good it is. 5G, one chunky ass adapter, one USB cable, even says that it's USB in case you're a bit confused. And so yeah, a fairly respectable effort. As usual, of course, that AP speaker isn't anywhere near as powerful as the bottom-mounted speaker, but neither is it particularly tinny or anything, and on top volume, that'll absolutely blast audio at your face. Even with the rowdy child in the room, you should have no problem hearing what's going on. And if you jump on into the audio settings as well, loads of stuff to play around with, including a good bit of support, as you can see there, for DTS:X Ultra. Good news if you want a bit of surround sound action. Of course, you will need a compatible pair of headphones for that bad boy, and then you can dive on into the audio preferences. As you can see, they've got various defaults set up depending on what you're up to. And you can even get your ears assessed as well, see exactly how good / crap they are, and basically it'll just help you to set up a little preset just custom made for your locals. So now performance, and the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra 5G is powered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 888 chipset, backed by either 8 or 12 gigs of DDR5 RAM. This is the 8 gig model, and you know what? It ran Genshin Impact on those top detail settings at 60 frames per second, with one tiny little judder the entire time. I noticed it during a good 30-40 minute gameplay session. And the phone didn't heat up beyond sort of slightly toasty at any point either, even after a sort of fairly long session. You've got several different cooler methods packed in here, including a vapor chamber, you've got layers of graphene, copper piping to help dissipate that heat. So yeah, so the phone can definitely handle a reasonably long session on whatever you like. And the 300 Hz touch sampling of the display, it means that every poke is instantly replicated as well, so great news for your fast-paced action games like PUBG, Call of Duty, where every millisecond counts. There doesn't appear to be any kind of gaming mode, unfortunately, here on the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra. Certainly none that I could find buried away in the settings, or, when I had a quick scout around online as well. Although the phone will manage your resources when you are gaming to help give you maximum memory and all the other stuff that you need in order to ensure that smooth gaming experience holds up. You've also got full 5G support as well, courtesy of that Snapdragon 888 chipset and the X60 modem that is buried within, and Wi-Fi 6E support as well, so as far as connectivity goes, near bother. As for the battery tech, it's a 4600 mAh cell stuffed inside of the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra, which, not the biggest around, but certainly a perfectly respectable size. I've been using the phone for about 24 hours now, and the battery drain doesn't seem to be particularly harrowing. Even the likes of gaming on Genshin Impact, a good bit of camera play and all that, doesn't seem to impact the battery any worse than any other smartphone out there. I certainly expect a full day of use out of the Axon 30 Ultra on a full charge. And if you do find yourself in sudden dire straits, you're going out for the night on the lash or whatever, you've got practically no battery power left, no worries, you can give it an emergency boost with a 65-watt fast charging support, so you can get it filled up pretty nippily. And let's finish up this unboxing with a test of that camera tech. And as you can probably tell from the hilariously enormous camera chassis slapped on the back of the Axon 30 Ultra, we got a lot of camera hardware to cover here. And gotta say, ZTE's camera UI isn't the prettiest around, certainly not by a long shot, but it certainly is feature packed, that's for sure. And it does give you lots of helpful advice with that AI mode on, such as, for instance, there's a face-in shot, you might want to enter the portrait mode. With the primary camera, you've got a 64 megapixel shooter using Sony's IMX686 sensor with optical image stabilization to help prevent blurry shots, and certainly the shutter speed is nice and nippy, and I've had absolutely zero issues with the focus speed as well. That is proper quick. And to test it out, I took the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra out and about, including a lovely bit of a seaside stroll in 5-degree weather to capture some sample shots, and so far I'm definitely happy with the realistic detail-packed photos I've seen. You've also got a 64 megapixel ultra-wide angle lens using Samsung's GW3 sensor, and this is similar to the Oppo Find X3 Pro for producing ultra-wide angle shots with strong detail and minimal distortion, although you do still get typically warm visuals like most ultra-wide angle lenses do produce, so do not expect natural looking colors. Then the third lens is actually a 64 megapixel portrait lens. So as you can see there, it snaps to that portrait lens when you enter portrait mode. So 64 meg, it's got a 35mm focal length, and it uses that Samsung GW3 sensor once again. And as you can see there, the phone will once again guide you with prompts to tell you exactly what kind of distance you need to be from your subject. You do have to get pretty close with them. There's no OIS built into this as well, so you'll have to keep the phone quite still and try and make sure your subject stays still as well, otherwise you will get blurry results. As you can see here, you've got various effects you can play around with. You can change up the color effects. You've got the usual stage light, shenanigans, stage light mono, etc, etc. You've also got a beauty mode, which frankly I would just avoid, and then you can change up the bokeh effect too. And so far seems like a reasonable shooter. You've got accurate edge detection even when you're dealing with crazy out of control windswept hair, while skin tones and other hues look natural to my eye. And then last up, there's an 8 megapixel telephoto lens with 5 times optical zoom chops, 10 times hybrid zoom, and it maxes out at 60 times zoom. You do have optical image stabilization to help keep things nice and sharp. And up to the 10 times zoom point, you can get crisp results, quite natural looking visuals too, but beyond that things quickly get grainy, and if you're shooting a human subject, they'll look like they've got some kind of horrific skin disease. And then besides the portrait mode, you've got the usual camera bonus features as well, including a night mode, which I'm actually quite impressed with. This can really help to brighten up a very dark scene indeed, and without blowing out the strong light sources that might be contained within. Got quite a few extra bonus bits you can play around with as well, including a manual mode if you want to dick about with the controls yourself. And you do have a 64 megapixel resolution mode as well if you want to shoot that maximum res level, otherwise it's 16 megapixels all the way. You got the obligatory moon mode, which could just help to highlight the moon and really enlarge it. If you want to freak people out on Facebook, make them think the world's about to end or something. And lots of different video options to play around with as well. If you give it another little tap, as you can see, you've got the likes of an HDR mode, which you can swap to a movie mode as well. This gives you extra options to play around with. You can swap between all 3 of the main lenses, the portrait lens, the standard lens, and the ultra-wide angle lens, and you can mess around with the white balance to match your environment. As you can see there, you shoot at 1080p by default. You've got a choice of either 30 or 60 frames per second, otherwise you can bump up to 4K, and once again shoot at either 30 or 60 FPS, or finally you've got an 8K option, which shoots at 30 FPS. There's no 60 FPS option there, because that would be bonkers. And then last up, around front, you do have a 16 megapixel selfie shooter, which I did again test out at the seaside yesterday. Seems absolutely fine for your bit of gram action. And of course you can shoot nice portrait shots, get the bokeh style blur in the background. And you've even got the all night mode for the selfie snapper as well, if you want to shoot yourself up in the club. When that's allowed again. Not too long, hopefully. And there you have it, my pretties. That in a nutshell is the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra, or the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra 5G to give it its full name, but I'm starting to refuse to put 5G at the end of smartphone names, because let's face it, pretty much everything now has friggin' 5G. Certainly when you get to this sort of mid-range to premium price point anyway. And so far, I've got to say, I really do like it. It is a bit of a bad bonkers design and everything, but I think that kind of adds to the appeal. The performance is spot on, the battery life seems absolutely fine. I really like that nice, crisp, gorgeous display. And you've got a pleasantly stock-ish version of Android on there with a few bonus custom features that are definitely worthwhile. More than anything, I'm just glad that ZTE didn't f it up by going for another weird under-display selfie camera or any other gimmicky nonsense like that. Just seems to do its job really nicely indeed. So anyway, that's what I think about the ZTE Axon 30 Ultra 5G. What do you guys think? It'd be great to hear from you down in the comments below. Go check out my coverage of all the other phones that have launched this week. There's quite a few going on. Please do poke, subscribe, ding that notifications bell, and have yourselves a fantastic rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you.